Title: The Global Corn War. Has America lost its agricultural crown? American corn farmers are sounding the alarm, urging Congress to act before a looming disaster unfolds. A proposed ban in Mexico on U.S. genetically modified, GM, corn imports, combined with new trade policies, is shaking the agricultural industry to its core. Canada has rejected $12 billion in U.S. corn, flooding global markets with surplus grain at bargain prices. The result? Cheaper food abroad while your grocery bills climb higher. Corn isn't just livestock feed, it's fuel, it's medicine, and it's the backbone of nearly every product in your cart. 7 nations are leveraging America's surplus to lock in permanent cost advantages. But the biggest shock hasn't hit your news feed yet. Stay tuned until the end of this video to understand why your grocery bill may never return to what it was. Number 7. Spain. Elena Rodriguez, from Spain's Ministry of Agriculture, oversees grain imports from her office overlooking Valencia's port, where U.S. corn shipments now arrive weekly. Spain boosted U.S. corn imports by 1.8 million metric tons, capitalizing on 20% discounts to replace unstable Ukrainian supplies and costly Brazilian alternatives. Elena's team worked directly with Iowa grain elevators, signing purchase agreements that bypassed European brokers who typically inflated prices. The result? Spain's livestock industry exploded. Lower feed costs enabled Spanish poultry producers to outcompete French and German rivals in billion-dollar North American export markets. Catalan pig farmers expanded, seizing market share from Danish producers still paying premium prices for traditional grain sources. Beyond agriculture, Spain's renewable energy sector benefited. Cheap corn-based ethanol allowed Spanish refineries to bid aggressively for EU biofuel contracts. Spain didn't just buy corn. They restructured their entire agricultural cost base, investing in new equipment and expanding processing capacity, transforming the nation into a Mediterranean export powerhouse. Number 6. The Philippines. Roberto Santos coordinates feed supply chains across the Philippines' 7,000 islands, where livestock operations suddenly gained massive competitive edges thanks to cheap U.S. corn. The Philippines imported 232,600 metric tons of U.S. soybean meal and ramped up corn purchases beyond what agricultural planners projected. Conglomerates like San Miguel Corporation and JG Summit Holdings acted swiftly, forging direct ties with U.S. grain cooperatives, bypassing costly Singapore and Hong Kong trading hubs. The livestock revolution was immediate and dramatic. Philippine pork production, long constrained by expensive imported feed, expanded rapidly with U.S. corn priced 30% below regional alternatives. Poultry producers began competing for Southeast Asian export contracts, undercutting Thai and Vietnamese rivals. Food processing giants like Universal Robina Corporation used cheap U.S. corn to scale up snack production, challenging international brands. Century Pacific Food leveraged lower costs to boost canned goods exports across the Asia-Pacific. The Philippines' strategic location between U.S. West Coast ports and Asian markets slashed transportation costs, giving them an edge over mainland competitors. Number 5. Saudi Arabia. Prince Khaled Al Faisal runs Saudi Arabia's strategic grain reserve program, turning cheap U.S. corn into a cornerstone of the kingdom's food security. This year, Saudi Arabia imported $238.8 million in U.S. corn, stockpiling supplies and building lasting relationships with grain cooperatives in Iowa, Illinois, and Nebraska. The kingdom's public investment fund secured direct purchase agreements with cash payments, eliminating traditional trading risks. Cheap corn fueled investments in desert agriculture, with NEOM's vertical farming facilities processing U.S. corn into livestock feed. Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 diversification plan identified food processing as a strategic sector, and cheap U.S. corn provided raw materials for factories competing with European and Turkish firms. Aramco's petrochemical division found unexpected synergies, as corn-based ethanol plants became commercially viable. Massive port expansions enhanced grain handling, turning strategic reserves into commercial advantages, allowing Saudi Arabia to buy U.S. corn during harvest seasons and distribute year-round. Prince Khaled's program didn't just secure food supplies, it positioned Saudi Arabia as a regional agricultural hub, serving Kuwait, the UAE, and other Gulf states. Number 4. South Korea. Kim Sung-ho, from Samsung C&T's food division, manages grain imports for South Korea's massive food processing and livestock industries. U.S. corn imports surged by 6 million metric tons, reaching $73.7 million, as conglomerates like Hyundai Corporation and LG International signed exclusive contracts with U.S. grain cooperatives, ensuring stable volumes and quality. South Korea's food manufacturers reshaped global dynamics. CJ Cheiljedang, the world's largest amino acid producer, used U.S. corn priced 25% below Chinese competitors to expand production and exports to Southeast Asia and Europe. The livestock sector restructured rapidly, with pork and poultry producers like Haram and Dongwon building new facilities and integrating supply chains from feed to retail, competing in Japanese and Chinese markets. South Korea's shipbuilding giants, Hyundai Heavy Industries and Samsung Heavy Industries, designed specialized grain carriers for trans-Pacific routes. Agricultural equipment makers like Doosan and TYM supplied U.S. farmers with tractors and harvesters, often financed through long-term grain purchase agreements, creating strategic partnerships far beyond commodity trading. Number 3. Japan. Takashi Yamamoto, from Japan's National Federation of Agricultural Cooperative Associations, manages corn imports for a nation entirely reliant on foreign supplies. Japan imported $2.78 billion in U.S. corn this year, increasing purchases by 2.1 million metric tons through strategic joint ventures with U.S. grain elevators. Giants like Mitsubishi and Mitsui provided capital for technological upgrades in exchange for decades-long exclusive supply agreements. Japanese food companies redefined their global position. Ajinomoto, the world's leading amino acid and seasoning producer, used cheap U.S. corn to expand into Europe and Latin America, challenging German and U.S. chemical firms. Japanese agricultural equipment makers supplied U.S. farmers with precision planting and GPS-guided harvesting systems, financed through grain contracts. Logistics firms like Nippon Yusen and Mitsui OSK Lines built specialized bulk carriers, slashing trans-Pacific transport costs. Japan's beef industry, renowned for Wagyu, integrated U.S. corn into feeding programs, cutting costs while maintaining quality and expanding exports across Asia. Number 2. Colombia. Isabella Morales, from Grupo Nutrisa, Colombia's largest food conglomerate, oversees grain procurement, turning a necessary expense into a strategic weapon. Colombia imported $1.56 billion in U.S. corn, totaling 7.03 million metric tons, through direct ties with U.S. grain cooperatives in Iowa, Illinois, and Nebraska. Conglomerates like Grupo Nutrisa and Alpina restructured supply chains, bypassing traditional commodity markets. Colombia's food processing industry boomed, with Grupo Bimbo expanding bread and processed food exports across Central America and the Caribbean, outpacing Mexican competitors. Cattle and poultry producers, fueled by U.S. corn 30% cheaper than regional alternatives, scaled up to serve domestic and export markets. Colombia's government and private sector expanded ports in Cartagena and Barranquilla, creating grain handling hubs that serve not only Colombia but also Venezuela, Ecuador, and Central America, positioning the country as South America's agricultural trade gateway. Number 1. Brazil. Fernando Silva, based in Brasilia, manages grain logistics across Brazil's Cerrado region, directing exports through ports that now challenge U.S. agricultural dominance worldwide. Brazil didn't just benefit from U.S. corn trade disruptions, it seized global market relationships built by American farmers over 7 decades. Brazilian corn exports surged 11-fold since 2004, from 198 million bushels to 2.2 billion bushels, driven by its double cropping system and modern infrastructure. As Canada and Mexico faced U.S. tariff barriers, Brazil offered reliable deliveries and stable pricing. Investments in railways and ports like Santos and Paranagua cut transport costs by 40% compared to U.S. systems. Mexico and Canada signed 5-year exclusive contracts with Brazilian suppliers, while the EU shifted to Brazil for long-term supply security. Companies like BRF and JBS use cheap domestic corn to expand processed food exports across Latin America, Europe, and Asia, outcompeting U.S. manufacturers. Brazil's biofuel producers also scaled up ethanol exports, challenging U.S. renewable energy firms. A temporary crisis or a permanent defeat? Is this a fleeting storm or has America permanently lost its agricultural crown? Brazil is building a global agricultural empire, capitalizing on U.S. trade missteps. But with smart trade policies and infrastructure investments, America could reclaim its market share. Your grocery bill is rising, and if this trend continues, prices may never drop. What do you think? Is this a temporary shock, or has America handed its agricultural throne to Brazil? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more in-depth analyses like this.